Welcome to today's episode of Torcom Talk. Today, this episode I think I am most proud of. It's because I had the team from Guardian Group on. And this one goes deep. This is something that everybody needs to watch or listen to. People need to know that in Bend, Oregon and across the U.S. that sex slavery is a thing and that people need to start doing something about it. It is happening right here in our little mountain town of Bend. Like it or not, up to 300 cases a year, a lot of them underage. These women are coerced into doing this. There's initiation, gang rapes, drugs, all right here. Not enough is being done. These guys are doing something about it. And Mazama is proud to be standing behind them now to be doing something about it as well. So please get educated, sit back, and share this with as many people as you can, because that is what's going to bring awareness to this ugly world that's happening right in our own little town. And it's what's going to lead to us getting rid of it. Because without knowing, how are you going to do anything? All right, guys, thank you so much for being on the show. It's incredibly exciting to have you on. This all kind of started from having your wife on the show. So Shannon and I have been mentors to each other. More of her a mentor to me than me to one her, and opportunity knocks over the years. And so asked her to be on the show. We got into the sex slavery of what's going on in India. And that was appalling, and then she touched on that's actually happening here too. And I was just like, okay, it's happening here. And my idea of it was a pretty woman idea of it. People, they mean to do it and everything like that. And she explained to me this concept that we can get into called like a Romeo pimp, and how they really are sex slaves, and that they're trapped into it. So I was just like, holy crap, made me sick to my stomach. Then Jeff, we went to lunch. Then I got really sick to my stomach. And I was like, this is something that people need to know about. The fact that when I go around and I talk to, different professionals here in Bend, male professionals and female, both, they're like, the common reaction as I've become like a donor and helping as much as we can to you guys, and as I'm explaining it, the common reaction is like, really in Bend? In disbelief. I'm like, yes, and at a scale much higher than you probably think too. So I'm really, this is probably a podcast, and I haven't said this about any others, that I am the most excited about to have you guys on to educate the town. Normally this is about business, but this needs to be talked about because this affects the business community. So diving in, I guess I'd like to start with, if you guys can explain from your words, like, how is it a problem in Bend? Where I that's an open question. I'm gonna leave it as an open question that. Yeah. And let's just start there.
It's funny. That's a super complex question. Like, how is it a problem here? I think at the beginning, when we started looking at this 10 years ago in Central Oregon, the problem was that nobody knew of the problem. And to include everyone from law enforcement, service providers, all sorts of people. So it was really the problem, and that's where I think our team is really good at, is being able to solve problems. And at the beginning was, not only is this a problem, we quickly found out that yes, it's happening nationally, yes, it's happening in Central Oregon. One of the problems was that people weren't working together, even if they found out about the problem. And so we quickly started bringing together the right folks of people to work on this, and then training everybody that sees it. So it's seeing it from the law enforcement perspective, to a first responder, to emergency rooms, to shelters. We created the first response team here, so it's a task force here.
Yeah.
And then we started collectively going after it and seeing, this is happening here. It's happening at an alarming rate. We'll tell you some statistics in a little bit, but it's happening in all sorts of sectors. So We see that families have trafficked out their kids, so you get the familial side, but you also have pimps trafficking girls as well. A lot of it happens online.
Families
Uh-huh.
that are okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I heard that right. Families
Yeah.
trafficking out their own kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so at the beginning, part of us, my wife, we had experience with a girl that was trafficked by her grandmother. So it's
Where were they?
locally.
In Bend.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And I won't go into detail about
That's
that.
okay. I
but
think it's enough detail if people need to know. Like that
it happens.
horrible story is here.
So
It's
the
not in
problem
Portland.
happens here for
Yeah.
sure. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you guys go into some details.
Well, I think that's the fascinating thing about this crime is when we talk statistics to you, it's what we can see. So what Guardian Group really focuses on is the commercial sexual exploitation. So it's a business. We're looking at the business of selling boys and girls online. That's what we can see. These familial trafficking, these things like you just bumped into here in your own place of work.
Right.
We can't see that until it hits the commercial level. So the numbers that we tell you,
Commercial level meaning
it's literally for sale. It's like if you develop some hot sauce and it never hits the commercial level, it's never for sale. How do I know it even exists? How am I ever going to know about your hot sauce, except for the fact that you start telling us about it? And there's an entire industry all over the world, and even in Central Oregon, that these girls are being passed around familial wise with gangs or groups. So when we tell you these numbers, these are staggering numbers to people, but it's the tip of the iceberg. And one of the numbers that we like to demonstrate to folks is commercially, there's about 8,000 sex ads in Bend a year. 8,000 a year.
Okay, so what is a sex ad?
So a sex ad is
Could you put their website up?
where, let's say, it used to be much more akin to like a Craigslist. Like you could go on Craigslist, and you still can, but it's much harder to do. It's almost like going to an Amazon website and you're ordering up a girl. These girls are posted online. There's usually a photo. It may or may not be them, and it'll be a descriptor of what it is they do sexually, and how to get in contact with them, what their rates are, how to get in contact with them. And when we talk to folks in Bend, on every single escort site that we know of, there's a drop-down menu for Bend, Oregon. So what that should tell you is whoever's creating this website already knows there's enough of a market in Bend, Oregon to go through the trouble of creating a drop-down for us.
So then how do they advertise? So having a website's one thing, but without advertising, it's just a billboard in the desert, as we like to tell like our clients here. You have to have something pushing it. So how do they push people there?
So a number of ways, but predominantly it's sitting there and people know to go there. The most famous one was called Backpage, which recently got shut down. So people just know, like if you want to order food to go, you go to Grubhub, right?
Sure.
How do you know that?
Marketing.
I know that
Facebook
because my wife
ads,
told me.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's there isn't a lot of external advertising for these sites. There is, but it's on dating sites and it's on pornography. That's where the marketing is driving these customers. Most of it is the customers go specifically to this site to buy these girls. And
how are they doing it on social media? Because we've had talks about this, like there's symbols or there's like I forget what it was. Yeah.
Descriptors.
So the sale of these girls on social media isn't as high as we're seeing it on these escort sites. Usually the girls are advertised that they're for sale, and then that transaction will jump off of that platform.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
the transaction can take place in Messenger or one of these other,
Right,
but they'll usually drive you to another platform.
Got
So
it.
that is a good example of marketing. They're out there on social media, fairly obvious on who they are and what they do.
Cool.
So back to Ben specifically, it's about 8,000 ads a year, and we estimate about 3% of the ads are involve minors. So you do the quick math on that.
What's the average age, you think?
The average age that we think of girls for sale is probably about 18 or 19
Okay.
that are commercially for sale, because the pimps and traffickers are smart enough to not really get them out there to the big market until they've passed that threshold of trafficking.
What happens when they're 15?
that's an automatic trafficking violation. So legally,
But it still happens.
it still happens, but not at the commercial at the highest commercial level.
Okay.
Because again, think of the risk.
But they're both illegal.
But no one really cares about prostitution, and the punishment
Okay.
for prostitution is very, very low. So if a girl is underage, it's automatic trafficking. Trafficking has 3 legal components: force, fraud, or coercion. You have to demonstrate one of those for our district attorneys to file a trafficking charge. So if you are in, when I'm using air quotes, prostitution, it's a simple prostitution case. If you're of age and you can't demonstrate force, fraud, and coercion, that can take some work.
Okay.
If you're under 18, that's automatic trafficking. So that's why Guardian Group, we try to focus as much as we can on finding that minor, because it's often an open and shut case.
How often do you guys find them?
Again, about 3%. About
3%,
3% of the time.
okay.
And we're trying to improve those through expanding our manpower as well as the technology that we have doing the work for us.
Okay. What's the youngest human you guys have found in Bend that it was trafficked?
I think 13.
Yeah.
I've worked with other groups around, and again, let me, I'll say this to you just because it's going to gross you out. 9 months is the youngest that I've ever heard of a victim being sold for sex. And
the youngest federal case last year was 6 months.
was 6 months. And
What the fuck?
yeah. So keep in mind, when what we're talking about is not pedophilia. This is all these categories. So you have prostitution writ large, and I'm using air quotes again, the healthy male that wants to buy a female of age. Okay, that's one category. That's where most of these buyers are coming from. It's not that they want a child. It's the trafficker or the predator can manipulate that girl when she's younger. When she's 13, 14, 15 years old, he can convince her and manipulate and control her much easier than when she's an adult.
So that gets into the Romeo pimp type thing, right?
Right.
So I'd like you guys to explain what that is to educate people as to. There's been arguments even when Shannon was on. There was a clip of micro content on my LinkedIn that you jumped in as well, where one person was saying like, "Well, how is it slavery when they're at will?" And I was just like, "I'm not touching this." I'll let you know. But yeah, if you guys wouldn't mind explaining that concept.
Yeah, so a Romeo pimp, he comes in, he's really manipulative, very narcissistic usually, but very smooth. So he's going to act like this girl's boyfriend. He's interested. He's there to solve a problem. We see it happen on social media. You know, a girl will post, "My mom's the worst," or "School sucks," and he swoops in to solve that problem. My mom was terrible too. School was awful for me too. And so he finds a way to connect, and then starts to buy gifts and kind of just completely sweep her off her feet. And she falls in love. You know, a young 13, 14, 15-year-old girl is just looking to be
And that's
accepted.
typically when this is happening, when they're that young. Okay.
Yeah. So she just wants to be accepted. She wants a boyfriend. She wants that kind of status. And so they're very good at manipulating that need in a young girl and then using that to eventually traffic them out.
It's the most common way you see it. And again, when you think of this as a business and risk to business, if you can lure a young girl away from her family, that's way safer than kidnapping her.
So
that's
how
way safer than being violent to her in the short term.
How would the Romeo pimp then, like for a girl that, let's say the girl is 14 and he sees that she's from a broken home, how is he going to convince her that it's time to leave Bend, if that's the play, and then do their first sexual act?
They're all different. We can probably all share a separate story. They're all different, but I think the common denominator is, going back to what Andrea said, was that predator recognizes what it is you want. Do you want fame? Then I'm convincing you I have a job for you in modeling, or I have a job for you in my music video.
So I have a job for you down in Sacramento for modeling.
Exactly.
Yep.
You know, do you want a partner? Do you want that love? Then I'm going to marry you. We're going to get married. Let's run away and get married. Oh, we can't afford to get married. What if we sell you a couple times?
Just one time.
Just one time,
Yeah.
and then we can get married. And then the other really common one is the combo of that is the blackmail, where they will get compromising photos. And I could be wrong. The sextortion. Yeah. The biggest thing that I've seen, and correct me if you think this is inaccurate, Jay, but the biggest one we've seen from Bend of the girls that are getting lured and recruited and taken outside, it is that promise of like excitement. Mm-hmm. You know, you're this little small town girl. I've got some really exciting things for you to see, and within 24 or 48 hours, it becomes a violent assault, drugging, gang rape. What? And then the psychological breaking to that girl, she now thinks.
So they get the girl like down like say L.A.
Yep.
And then it's time for a drug and rape session.
Yeah. Or even here in our hotels.
Even in our hotels, where
it's called their breaking. Every victim will experience it.
And at what point do they brand them?
Again, it depends. Let's finish up the breaking one too.
Yeah,
because what happens then psychologically is you don't have any kids, do you? You have any kids?
I don't know.
Okay, go. So imagine you had a 15-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And you're telling her, you know, this guy you're dating, he's an older guy. He's really not good news. You know. She sneaks out of the house. You think she's at a party with some friends. She goes to party with this guy. She gets drugged and gang raped, and it's all on video, audio, photos. And then he tells her, you need to figure out a way to leave your family and come with me, or I'm going to show this to your dad. That is that point, and it's an incredible success ratio that they have, where the girls feel so isolated that they'd rather protect that relationship with you.
I thought there was more romance and stuff.
Not that we've seen. Now,
no.
I think it can
Not
happen.
that makes it better, but
it could happen over time.
Yeah. But in Bend, when we're talking about Bend, because in Bend, the trafficker in Bend, he can't hang out forever.
No.
He doesn't fit. He doesn't belong here. He doesn't fit here.
Yeah.
So he has a finite amount of time to break this girl. You know, in a bigger city like a Portland or Seattle or LA, they live next to you, or they have a little bit longer time. So I'm describing very specifically.
And that's a good differentiation. We went to Portland to do a documentary, part of a documentary or whatever, and we brought the film crew out to the Lloyd Center. It's a mall out there, and we said, hey, it could take time for us to see this, but this is what we're looking for. And what you're saying, you know, it started off literally with it when we were there. Within probably 5 minutes, we see it. We see a pimp. We already know he's a pimp. Come up to a new girl and just ask, "Hey, sweetie, you know, you look cute. Just got out of school." She's a junior hire, it looked like.
Jeez.
And by the time they had walked down this little 100 yards, he had already gotten her phone number and saying, "Hey, I'm going to text you tonight." That could play out over months, but here what we do see it's tightened. It's a lot quicker. So they still may do that. You know, they may come to our mall. We don't have a big mall here. They may hit up girls that are at the shelters or runaways, you know, right next to the Hawthorne bus station. Yeah. You'll start seeing people there coming in from out of town. And it does. It's a breaking that, but it's a breaking of their spirit. And it's these guys are professionals. They know how to target these girls. They know that if they may watch somebody for a couple of years even, you know, when they're really young. So they know, okay, there's something different about this girl. She doesn't believe in herself, or whatever it is. And then there's a time where they just enter in and they either can, you know, break her quickly or over that time.
One tactic that I'm pretty sure we heard here, a guy would walk up to two girls walking down the street and say, "Wow, you're beautiful." And the one that looked down or said, "No, I'm not," he knew in that minute he could break her. That's how good he was at figuring out that vulnerability. Versus the girl that was like, "Oh, thanks," and kept walking and was much more confident. He knew she wasn't a good target for him.
Okay. This is all like hitting home even more than normal because we had Andrea and Jeff over to help with their we were just doing a free Facebook overhaul on like, hey, here's the best way we can get this, here's some stuff that we can do to help get the word out, which we're happy to do. And then after that one of my team members, her daughter, basically went missing, and probably in Portland, and there was a lot of scandalous like Venmo stuff going on, and all of a sudden it became something that I was outraged about to begin with, but then after, what was that? Was that Tuesday? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was Tuesday. I was I had a lot of anxiety going through me. I was like sick to my stomach, and just like when it starts hitting, and knowing that the person who it did happen to, she's an excellent, wonderful mom, and luckily she did come running back. I'm not quite sure exactly what happened, but you guys were awesome enough. I called Jeff, you picked up and just jumped onto the social media and are looking to help, and way more empathetic than the police, because the police basically gave her an answer of it was her choice to run away, sort of thing. Like they were concerned, but not really. While you guys were like, okay, we dive into this and everything like that. So just hearing this stuff and knowing that like we have a positive culture with like all these great humans right here at Mazama, and it did happen here in Bend, and it can happen. So if anybody's listening to like, well, not to my daughter. Are you really so sure? Can you be? No, you really can't. And so start looking for this stuff. So you guys are saying that. Another thing I want to jump into, which I think is really cool to kind of go on a more bright thing that's really, really cool I think you guys are doing, is if we had to go into the task force a little bit. And the fact that you guys are ex-military and a bunch of badasses that are looking to bust down on sex trafficking. But I'll let you guys have taken that. So tell me about the task force.
So what I think is interesting is when Andrew was talking about the grooming, it's the same way that you create a radical Islamist suicide bomber. It's the same way. When we look at this cycle, and why are we still in these constant fights in the Middle East? Because there's a constant supply of in this particular sense, it's disenfranchised men. It's men that are looking for a sense of meaning. It's men that are looking for a sense of purpose, something greater than themselves. And the cycle is exactly the same. So Al-Qaeda, ISIS types are scouring social media, assessing and recruiting young men for vulnerabilities. And they lure them in, and then there's a breaking period, very similar to what is happening in sex trafficking. So many of us at Guardian Group are very familiar with that. And as a counterterrorism expert, along that cycle, guess where I intersected with that individual? Before he was going to be, either before or after he was a lethal threat. So my job was to capture or kill that individual. The job of interdicting that cycle of exploitation, we as a nation still do very, very poorly. There are more radicals being born and created every day than ever. And it's the same issue with the sex trafficking. When we looked at what we could apply our skills towards, and what crime we thought most accurately mimicked radicalizing a terrorist, it was creating a victim of sex trafficking. And these, Jeff called them professionals, which I hate to give them that much credit, but they are absolute experts at exploitation and manipulation. The methods they use to break apart these victims are the things we're taught to fight against. If I'm ever captured by an adversary, what are they going to do to twist my mind? What are they going to do to control me and alter my allegiances? These guys are absolute experts at manipulation. So this was something that we began to look at years ago, and I think it was more than luck that Jeff and I met each other over a beer on a patio at a mutual friend of ours' retirement. And it's always a tough one when someone asks, "Oh, what do you do?" And we often say errantly, "I'm in sex trafficking." You know what I mean? Because even I'm in counter sex trafficking. And I remember very specifically meeting him, the only ginger that was there. We don't allow a lot of gingers in the special operations. And I said, "What is it? What is it that you do?" And he was doing exactly what I wanted to do as we moved towards retirement.
Yeah, and then we just fleshed that out over the last, how many years? 5-6 years. What is that? And it came back to that problem. He knows that problem on multiple layers. One of the best strategists in the world here. And so how do you take those strategies and actually shape a problem so people can understand it, but actually start fixing that problem? And that's why it's a challenge, obviously, for us to enter into this. And nobody's done it before like what we sought out to do. So how do you share a problem with people that don't believe that it exists, and how do you share a solution that most people don't even want to hear, and you keep going? That's why we persevere through this. And we're at that place right now where law enforcement's reaching out to us, people are reaching out to us, everyone from St. Charles is asking for help. Every time we do a training,
St. Charles asking for help from like the ER or something like that.
Training, and then once we do trainings, no matter what, if it's law enforcement, first responders, whoever, we'll usually get a call within a week. Hey, we just saw what happened. Even a community, I did this community training, this was 6 years ago, and this business owner said that, he called me up, he said, I think one of my employees is doing exactly what you said. I said, can we get on the phone with her? And same thing, this guy had lured her, done the whole social media thing, and had bought her tickets to come down to Vegas. And we quickly found out that this guy's a guy that's not somebody worth visiting. So
sure,
we kept her from going down there. But there's that time element too behind this crime, where you don't get 72 hours a lot of times, you know.
And what we learned too in the spaces we went to, the people at Guardian Group in the military, into this counterterrorism world, was we had to be hyper-focused. We had to be hyper-focused on high-level Al-Qaeda and ISIS and those influencers, which is why I talk about how we're hyper-focused on these minors. And to defend law enforcement a bit too, is they're generalists. They enforce all laws.
Okay.
So when a young lady becomes up missing, and they go to their protocols, and the protocol is, has she been gone for 24 hours? And the answer is no. Somewhere along that chain of command, somebody has to say, well, I'm going to give you permission to not follow this protocol. They develop those protocols because the preponderance of these girls that go missing, they come back within 24 hours. And they're taking their limited resources and reshifting them. So why Guardian Group is such an integral part of law enforcement is it's all we look at. We're not looking at drugs. We're not looking at jaywalkers. We're not looking at hot dogs in cars. You know, we're not looking at noise violations. Our Bend Police Department, our Deschutes County Sheriff's Department, they're covering a million things at once. Sure. So we want to be that group that
you guys ever overload them?
Oh, it's easily, and that's there are kind of two things that I didn't quite see as we envision this. One is overloading the system, because in the military cycle, it's like 24 hours. You know, you have a target, you conclude that target. It's a 24-hour cycle, or maybe a couple of days. This process of trying to restore this girl takes weeks, months, and years. This process of trying to put this predator, this trafficker, this pimp behind bars takes weeks, months, and years. And then the other one too is just simply, again, it's the system. It's the systems of checks and balances we have in the United States. You know, what the criteria we have to reach overseas to say you're a terrorist is very different than a law, a state of law. So America gives these people that benefit of the doubt, and there's all sorts of loopholes that they exploit.
How can we go about changing that?
Elevate this as a crime that people care about. So, you know, in Bend, while Bend is not a hub, it's a destination location. There are pimps and traffickers coming here to sell their girls and recruit our girls. So for the community to have a voice and raise this, you know, I use that hot dogs and cars kind of tongue in cheek. Like, if you look to see how many law enforcement agents are dedicated to freeing hot dogs and cars in the summer, it's a lot more than ones that are specifically looking at counter trafficking. Now, is it because...
It's because the public says, how could this dog be in a car, and they take a picture and it goes over social media, and then you have the cute dog, and they're like, yeah, save that cute dog, and the cops are like, okay, and you get all these calls. Yeah. But when they're not trained, so that's the other thing, is trained. So That's what I see as the one thing. So how do I get trained, and how do other people get trained on what to look for?
Yeah.
Is it on the site? Is that what you guys are
This is a huge one, and that was the second piece too. Was that I call it the give a shit factor. I did not realize the give a shit factor to address sex trafficking
I didn't
of
give a shit
minors
until
was
about a month ago.
right because we all have life. So that's again.
Well,
the
I didn't
segue.
think it was a thing.
So that's part of it, and that's where Jeff and I were talking about kind of where we come from, but why Andrea is here is what she's working on and doing terrifically is raising that give a shit factor, and it isn't just the simple knowledge and awareness, but actually imbuing kind of a care and a respond to call to action. So I'll let her talk about it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we hear all the time, especially when we're advertising what we do online, is, oh, well, you got to start in Hollywood, or you got to start with politics. And that's true. Those areas do have issues. But instead, we want to start with a guy that's coming through Bend once a month.
Yeah.
We want to start with your next door neighbor that's buying girls, so that when your 10-year-old is 12, 13, 14, she's not their next victim. That's where we want to be.
It makes sense too. You control the economy. The U.S. is controlled much more by what I wish people understand a bit more is that it's not how you vote. It's not with the pen. It's how you vote with your wallet. That's where the organic movement came from. It wasn't let's make a bunch of laws and make people organic. That's what they wanted to do. So all of a sudden people stopped buying this stuff because they're like, wait, what's happening? They're forced against their will. This isn't something that they want to do. I hope would deter a lot of males from wanting to do this, but I'm sorry, go ahead. But I'm hoping that could do something when it comes to awareness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's tricky. It's not,
are.
We're not something that's fun to talk about. Like, this conversation isn't ever fun.
Yeah, that's why we need to have it, though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people don't have it proactively until it hits home, usually. And then once they do, then they start to recognize it and say, oh, this actually is happening. Like, when we train out at St. Charles or here locally, we get phone calls every time. Like, oh, now we see it. Now we're thinking about all the things that we missed in the past years. And so trying to get people to understand that, hey, we have to have this conversation even though it sucks.
And
important.
I like what you said, because I believe in an America that when they know this crime exists, they're not going to stand for it.
Yeah.
And look like you described, look at the things that have changed in our lifetime. I never wore a seatbelt until I was a teenager. You know what I mean? I never wore a bicycle helmet.
We used to throw our trash out the window.
We used to throw our trash out.
The sign came up, I said, it's $1,000 fine.
Yeah, it's not, and you said it exactly. It's where people prioritize with their money.
Well, the anti-plastic movement that's happening right now,
Outrageous.
that's also, I mean, there is laws, like a law has been passed in Seattle for plastic straws. There hasn't been one in Bend, but I don't know if you know
Have you
this.
heard about the anti-trafficking movement that's going on?
There should be one.
Yeah.
We wish.
But
well, that's what we're trying to start right now, right? That's what I get the anti-trafficking. We gotta get people outraged. Like, what got people outraged before was a freaking straw in a turtle's nose, and then all of a sudden, that's it. We're done here.
Yeah.
But I guess people wouldn't want to see a video of a girl getting gang raped and drugged.
Nor
We
do
also
want to do that.
want to re-victimize that girl.
Yeah.
So
But really, and that's why we have this weird problem of how do you get the community behind this? It's some of it's the shock factor.
But here's something we know, and this has been taught to us by a bunch of these older law enforcement retired cops, where they say they see where we are today in 2020, where we were like in the 70s when it came to domestic abuse, domestic violence. Dude, if you hit your wife, I can't stand you. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be like, she probably deserved it. We would look the other way. A cop would come to the door because of a domestic disturbance, and the woman's got a black eye. And did he have sympathy for that woman? He didn't. And why? Because he didn't understand, why is she still with him? If he's so bad, why is she standing here? Why doesn't she press charges? It took us 30, 40, 50 years to get to a point, and we're still not there. Domestic abuse still exists, but
very much
we
so.
understand it now. There's no question in your mind when you say, why does an abused
villainized
wife?
it.
We villainized it, yes. And we understand, why does an abused spouse stay with their husband? We know those answers now, because of the control and the fear and the brainwashing and all these emotional abuse. When we begin to recognize that with sex trafficking, and same with child abuse, why does a child who's being sexually abused not finger his abuser for 20, 30, 40 years. This is what we're dealing with. So we've seen successes. We understand child abuse a lot more. We understand domestic abuse a lot more. And yes, I would love to see this pivot from straws and turtle noses to getting these girls out.
Well, we
of this
were
bondage.
villainizing the victim. You know, they would arrest the victim, make her
Meaning the prostitute.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing is that,
you know, she deserves this or she wants to be here. And we've then, as law enforcement, I went through law enforcement training 20 years ago. You'd arrest that person.
Right.
It wasn't even an issue about like what's this trafficking thing. So we've hopefully moved on from villainizing her and villainizing the people we need to, or the traffickers and the Johns.
Right.
You could get arrested for this as a John here and be let go. So until you take the demand away, and then it's some of the shocking statistics too. We just took over the #1 position, Oregon, with the most sex offenders per capita.
Go us.
In the country. And you don't think that they're going to be part of that problem too?
Of course.
So
I wonder why that is.
and there's
No, seriously, I have no idea.
I don't
Do
know.
you guys have a theory?
It's lax laws on
Yeah,
that.
our laws are pretty lenient.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because again, we're actually lessening how we're villainizing these sex offenders. They used to be a pariah in our society, and there are segments in our culture now that is trying to empathize with them, trying to relate with the struggles that they go through.
Yeah, they're
And it's just
their
undeserved.
terms are being changed in California.
Yeah.
You can call somebody that's come out of prison.
I think making it known that these girls are slaves and not that they're willing to do it, having them know this Romeo pimp scenario at an age of 13 to 14. And, you know, when there was people commenting when the posts, when the podcast went off on those people, when I was mentioning earlier, on, you know, if it's their choice and it's not a slave. And I was like, okay. And what I started thinking to myself on that was, okay, here's an analogy for you. Why was it that an African-American slave back in the 1800s, why was it that he willingly went out and picked cotton? Well, because if he didn't, he would be whipped and possibly killed. What's going to happen to the girl if she denies doing this?
Yeah.
So I'm asking.
Yeah, the same. And
Yeah.
and the other aspect of that too, with your analogy, is when that slave is out there doing his menial labor, where's his family? Where's his wife and kid? Under control of the master. So when these girls are out there doing their work, servicing these Johns, oftentimes their families, their immediate families, are under threat, and
How
their
do
children,
they put their immediate families under threat?
because they tell them, you know, like you know, if you're working for me, and I tell you, if you go for help, I'm going to kill your family. I'm going to kill your mom. I'm going to kill your dad.
Okay.
I know where you live. I know where your cousins are. They're dead. I'll kill them all. I'll kill them violently. Now, if you have a child, I can lay that child over you. If we have a child together,
Yeah.
it's one of those fascinating. And I keep using the word
It's almost
fascinating.
worse.
It's probably closer
no, it's not worse.
to disgusting.
It's just the same. It's
But
a slave. It's a damn
changed-
slave.
Yeah, and it changes the way that she interacts with communities.
Yeah.
Like, she will never self-identify as a
Yeah.
victim.
Uh-huh.
So we have to, our community has to be the eyes and ears to that. Like, I know there was a sticker program going around the country, and hey, you know, if you're a victim, call this number. They're not getting many calls because they're not identifying, or they feel under threat. I'm not going to call that number.
Or they don't have access to a cell phone because they don't
Yeah.
have control of communication with you.
But when
outside
we
world.
as a community can become the eyes and ears and say, I think I see what this is happening,
Yeah.
we step in for her. And
See, and that's an
And that's
interesting
basically when
thing.
you're seeing like a girl with a shady looking guy that doesn't belong in Bend sort of thing. Is that one thing we're looking for? I guess you could go through here on the training on the website and figure that out.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it's hiding in plain sight, and what we've seen in Bend is the girls don't look like what you would consider a prostitute to look like. Oftentimes, they're carrying their sex clothes with them. They're dressed even not as
Yeah.
nicely as Andrew is now. They're in t-shirts and jeans. They're moving amongst us, and then they have in their bag the clothes because they're fulfilling this fantasy. I wanted to circle back real quick on something Andrew said with the phone. They may not have their phone, but I also want folks to understand that oftentimes they do have their phone, and it's a control measure. So that's what people look for a lot, is this girl who's completely isolated. She can't reach the outside world. Well, they control her through that phone. So even if she can call that number, very often these traffickers, they have the phone spoofed. Like, I see and know everything you do. So this idea of not looking for a girl that's isolated from technology, no, it's actually one of the shackles that they use to hold them. Oftentimes these girls will have 2 or 3 phones, different phones on them, because they have 2 or 3 different personas they're playing. So that's one of the simple ones that we ask, especially with kids. And the person that worked with you is, does your kid have hidden devices? Do they have cell phones you don't know about? Do they have computers and iPads that you don't know about? And if they do, why? You need to have those discussions with them. I don't have 2 phones anymore. I used to, but again, these are simple things that people can ask.
Sure. Okay. So what else you guys are doing? So 10 years now, like, going after this, not only here but across the nation. What does a normal day in the life look like in the office for you guys when it comes to battling this?
A normal day is a non-normal day.
I don't think we have
If you
a
have
normal.
2 days that look the same, then it's, at least for some of our team. Some of our team are looking at this problem online every minute of the day. So, but it's, we may get a call from a mom, daughter's gone. We may get a call from law enforcement needing help. We may get a call from Canada wanting to take our hotel training across the country. We're pursuing things as well, so we're not just waiting for people to call us. So that's one thing that sets us apart, is really different, is we're very proactive in this. You can't be preventing and stopping it from a sitting back.
Sure.
You have to be out at the front doing something, getting into the mess, getting into the grind, not being afraid of the gray. When I say that, we're 100% accountable to everything we do and 100% integrous. But there has to be an ability to adapt to a changing culture like this, because these traffickers are changing their methods, girls are changing, and if you're not good with change and problem solving, conflict management among even other community organizations that do things that you may not think you should, I think it's definitely not for the weak or faint of heart. So,
well, the typical day in Guardian Group just continually shows us how much more needs to be done and how much more we can do. I mean, even when we took the call from you and we started looking at developing what this might look like, there's so much we know we can't see, and that's where the day right now, almost every day, is incredibly frustrating. Because there's just so much more to do, but we know how to do this. We know the technology that needs to be pulled in, and there's so much growth that can happen. There will be a day when you reach out to us that we would have found that girl in a matter of an hour, and that day's coming, and it's just funding. It's
funding is the main thing you guys need to make that day come.
Yeah.
What about for people who can't afford to donate money?
Raise their voice.
Yeah, talk about it. Talk to your elected officials in your community about ways that they can change the laws or change their policies.
Policies. We were talking about this earlier. I would like to start with the corporate one that I didn't think of. And while you guys were telling me, I said to our HR lady, she was in her office, I was like, Keely, put this in our manual right now. What I'm talking about is you guys are saying having it be a standard that you are not allowed to buy. This sounds ridiculous I'm saying this, but it needs to be a standard. You're not allowed to buy a human for sexual things on a work computer on work time or anything like that.
Yeah, and it does sound ridiculous, but it's this idea.
Well, it should be one of these things that was like, well, duh, but like, no, we need to. Anyway, I'll let you guys go on.
But again, and I think it's one of those things. You do as a corporation, do you believe in the inherent value of every human being? And if you do, you disallow putting a price on that person and purchasing that person for your self pleasure. And that's where that's going to be a big day when corporations acknowledge that.
So how did you guys end up finding out that that would be an effective thing? What was the, oh my God, this should be a standard for all HR or employee handbooks?
Some of the reports that we read, they did some not local, but in Seattle, where they found out that the average time of purchasing sex online from a work computer,
3 o'clock.
3
in the
o'clock afternoon.
So that's when the majority of it is bought, is 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
So that purchase is made for a later time.
Right.
So guy gets off work at 5. You know what I mean? So they're lining up.
Swings by the hotel.
Or on corporate travel too.
Right.
We all know that. You know, that's why our city is also a little bit of a hot spot too, is because people love coming here. Conferences, events.
Yeah.
When you go to a conference, like a work conference, and you've got 10,000 employees to hide behind, you could do whatever you want.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything.
So having, so that's saying that's saying something pretty big. So basically putting in, and this is what we're doing today, in the HR handbook, I don't know exactly what the words are going to be, but it's going to be something along the lines of, if you buy sex, I want to just say period. If I catch it, you have done this period, not just on work times. Make sure, make sure at Keeley to write this down. I don't care if it's on work time or not. If it happens, period, you're fired. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And again, man, think back to the recycling. You're doing that here at Mazama. Let's jump forward 10 years from now. That's huge. If we can pull that off, that's
well,
huge.
I hope I influence, or we influence, at least one other business owner in town to be like, yeah, I should make that. Is that check? I mean, business leaders, please look at your employee handbook and let me know. DM me or comment. Do you guys have a policy? And if you don't, are you going to change that? Is that much of an ask too? And what's that going to say to your entire team? What's that going to say if St. Charles decides to put that as an HR response to their, I don't know how many hundreds, maybe thousands of employees they have, that you're not allowed to do this or you're fired, and all of a sudden people go, why is this even coming up? Yeah. As you were saying earlier, Andrea, that's a big marketing push. Why is this a problem? Because as I've been walking around town and saying, I'm like, yeah, it's happening, but no, it's happening. So now all of a sudden you make out this corporate email or a meeting, and everybody sees this like, okay, duh. Why is this? This is a thing. Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah, and then if you take the next step, so we're specific with hotels. So the River House here went through our hotel training, one of the first in the country to go through the Guardian Seal training. Not only are they aware of it, but they're actually trained on it now. Like when you go through our training and you see how it happens, you're disturbed. So there's one element to say, these are our policies and procedures for travel and just internal internet usage or whatever. But there's another one to say, hey, we're going to stand behind this. We've got companies doing matching grants for us, like matching donations. The statistic is that employees that are part of a company that gives to an organization like ours, or they're charitable, they have a 75% more tenure.
Yeah.
I guess this would be
because
a good
they
time
feel like they're involved in something.
This would be a good time to tell you guys that starting in 2020, every new client that signs with us, $100 is going to go to the Guardian Group.
I like that.
That's what it's about.
Yeah. We talked about that yesterday in a group meeting, and I was asking if anybody would be opposed to that, and everybody was very behind. I got a lot of direct messages, a lot of people coming up to me saying how much they value that.
That's huge, and it's just putting the dignity of humans just a little bit higher than we have them right now.
Yeah,
it's absolutely huge.
So we'll have the HR thing changed as a marketing thing. The $100 of every new sale coming on, and we're also going to be building for you guys like a $15,000 bot that will help educate people on basically an awareness campaign that will live in Messenger. It's going to be really cool because it's
phenomenal.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. Yeah. So Mitch is getting into sales, so
let's go, Mitch.
Yeah, let's go.
Come on, what are you doing? What are you doing back there?
All right. Okay, so I wanted to also jump back into policy really quick. So that's on corporate policy, and that's something that a lot of business leaders can do here. Now we're talking about political policy and influencing. How can people help with that with elected officials and whatnot?
I think one of the big ones that we always push for is require training for certain areas. So require your law enforcement to be trained, require your hotels to be trained, require your hospital staff to be trained, and just start there and then move out, because those three places are going to see it more than anyone else.
Okay.
So that's a good place to start. Just
Especially
that.
every one of us are customers. And so as a customer, if it's going to hit the pockets of a hotel owner, I'm not going to come to your hotel unless you're trained. Your people are trained. It'll shift the responsibility from us coming in and saying, "Hey, do you guys want this training?" No, it's not. It's not even required. Why would I take the training? Unless you have somebody we found that has a good heart, like David Lenke says, "I want to take this training. I want to get all of our people." But if the customers come alongside and say, I'm not going to even touch those hotels or whatever.
That's genius. That will help. That's like the whole organic movement type thing. If we can
that's the
get the word
effect
out. We get the word out where like, you don't have the seal, then I don't care. You're like, okay, we need the seal because we just lost 5 clients last week because they called and I didn't know what that was, but I need to know what it was. Or I said no to you guys before.
This really is, you're really astute with that, looking at this from a corporate answer, because that's what we're looking at. That the federal government is not going to solve this. State government, it's going to be the people, the community, and the corporations. With that being said, some very simple things people can do politically too is when that time of year comes, is you press your politicians, your district attorneys, your attorney general, your governor, your mayor, your judges. What is your stance and policy on counter trafficking and human trafficking? And again, just like you're looking to input that into your policies for Mazama. Every single time we read somebody's bio who's running for office, they should have a comment on it. They should have an opinion. And then the next step would be holding them accountable for any stance that they take.
How can we sniff out corruption in these cases? Because the reason I'm asking is the majority of people who can afford to buy sex are typically a bit wealthier. And those people also tend to influence political elections by putting in donations.
So let me just clarify a little bit when we talk about the strata of the buyer. All socioeconomic status is buy.
Okay.
Like the low, like even people that are on welfare are buying girls.
Okay.
What we do see is the high volume buyer. So statistically, the high volume buyer makes over $110,000. Again, now that's a no-brainer because
how much is a girl in Bend?
It depends. So a girl in Bend is at minimum $350 to $500
an hour.
But an hour.
So that's getting
we're
talking doctors, attorneys, business
they'll go
leaders.
overnight for $5,000 or $6,000. So
and now we're definitely talking doctors, attorneys.
Right. So when you're talking in Bend, we talk about this offsite. There's the volume of purchasers that are buying girls for $100, $200, $300. It's a higher volume, but there's enough of a volume in Bend that they're going for $5,000, $6,000, $8,000. We have the buyers in Bend, and those are the richer folks. So yes, there is that level of corruption.
How many calls are coming in?
Yeah, so when law enforcement tests out these systems, because these numbers that we have, we've validated with them and we continue to refine them. And when we say there's a demand, probably every quarter, law enforcement will test out this system, and they'll post a fake ad on one of these sites to kind of judge the response. And typically it's about 50 people calling within an hour or two.
50 people call
from Bend within an hour or two. So this goes back to even where you were looking at how do they even know to call? Because they're looking. They're not being driven to these sites. They're on these sites looking. So another interesting kind of anecdotal story is I was out at MIT at this hackathon.
Is there a way that we can do shaming of these people?
It's yes,
that's another policy
but it's also complicated. And I used to be really pro shaming. But our friends in Los Angeles, who have a very sophisticated human trafficking task force, they went away from shaming, and it's because it doesn't just shame the buyer, it shames his whole family. So now you have dad who is being shamed on TV or in the paper or in a billboard, and now these children have to go to school and also get shamed. His wife has to go to church or work and has to be shamed. So
fair enough.
In most of these places, you know what I mean? Like, nothing's easy.
No.
In most of these places, shaming is not something they work. So let me, excuse me, you'll have to edit this part. We were at MIT at a hackathon, building tools. And there's a company in Seattle. I won't be able to get through it. You have to talk about something else. I'm going to have to recover from this.
I'll make something up. No, I'm just kidding.
Do you want us to tell the story?
I think you know the story.
I know the story
tell it.
well
Do you?
enough to tell it. Yeah. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
while I was at MIT, this company in Seattle that creates bots to interact with Johns. And the goal of the bot
You
is...
guys keep on saying John, so John is a word for a
buyer.
Got
Same
it.
thing, yeah. The goal of the bot is basically they go to purchase sex and then the bot suggests other behavior. And so JT asked them to run a bot in our area to see what the response was. And for the first time, somebody in Prineville asked the bot, "Are you a bot?" And they'd never, ever had anybody ask them
So this
or
was
call them
a
out.
Sunday afternoon. They built this fake ad. It was posted. Again, about 50 responses within an hour or two. A man somewhere outside between here and Prineville, couldn't quite geolocate it. He's engaging with this bot, and what this bot is trained to do is, as you're texting back and forth, it's walking you down this line to make sure that you are, in fact, a buyer. You want to buy sex. And then it will tell you, hey, I'm a robot. We recommend you stop doing this. We've captured your phone number. We've captured your IP address.
Yeah.
It's a deterrence model. That seems to have a certain level of effect. So as this buyer was corresponding with this robot, he knew to ask if it was a bot. Because our federal law right now is you cannot pretend to be a robot in a two-sided conversation. And that's for you and me.
Sure.
We don't want a marketer, right? We don't want a robot telemarketer
No.
to walk us down this line. So the federally, they're protecting us. The federal law says you can't pretend to be a bot. So they have built into this model, if the buyer asks if it's the bot has to say yes. So there's a couple things that come out of this. One is, it's an example of the laws that are still restricting us, because we understand why that law exists,
Sure.
but we should have some exceptions when we're countering this crime. The second one is, the first time in hundreds of thousands of these bots being run across the United States, a buyer asked the bot if it was a robot. And that is a Deschutes County claim to fame. Somebody in Deschutes County is sophisticated enough
Yeah.
and has bought enough girls to know within 2 or 3 exchanges to ask this person on the other end if you're a bot.
And then wasn't he like, "Thanks, bye."
Is that pathetic?
Yeah.
Another claim to fame that we have.
It's interesting. Awful. So shaming, I guess, doesn't work. Just trying to find out a way of like taking this, because fighting the wealth thing is going to be difficult too. Perhaps educating, maybe just getting out the knowledge that these guys who are wealthy, who are paying for the 5,000, 6,000, know that they might be telling themselves that this isn't a slave, that this is a person and they're into it. So really pushing, letting them know, like, no, this is a slave. Just
Yeah,
like back in the 1700s, same deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one thing we like to help guys recognize and understand, because we do speak sometimes with like professional sports teams or high net worth, really successful people, and explain to them that this crime isn't what you think it is. They're fulfilling a fantasy that these girls are coerced into. 9 times out of 10, when you're engaging initially with this little sexy talk on the text, you're talking to the John. You're talking to the pimp.
The pimp, yeah.
Talking to the trafficker. He's the one that's describing all of these sex acts with you that are getting you turned on. When you go to meet that girl at the hotel, oftentimes the pimp is there. He's there in the room. He's under the bed. He's in the closet. He is there to ensure that he gets his money. Not always, but again, if you knew this, if you're LeBron James who thinks you're going to purchase a girl at some party, that pimp's going to want to make sure he's getting his money out of it, or they're going to roll you, etc. Like, this is not this fantasy that you've built up in your head is a poor girl who's being forced. Yeah, so think about that. How, with an M4 rifle.
Yeah.
And we know this as fact. It's not every time, but we know this as fact from survivors, and that was their MO. Especially when the pimp was worried about that girl not getting her money, or potentially that she was going to meet another pimp during this process. Yeah, there's nothing sexy
pimp
about
battles.
They compete with each other.
Got it.
But the good thing about the competition is that's what we're looking for half the time, because they have to deconflict their product by geography and brand and all of these things. We can see that discussion. That's mostly what we're looking for, is the pimp to pimp deconflict and synchronizing their business more than anything else.
Okay, so how can people donate to you guys? What's the easiest way?
GuardianGroup.org.
Okay.
Yeah.
So GuardianGroup.org, donate. Other thing is getting awareness, like we were saying. Look at who you're voting for. If you're not in a position at your business to change your HR employee book, talk to HR or the owner or who is. I feel like they would. I mean, how could you walk away from a conversation if you were to say, "Hey, can we put if you buy a sex slave that you're fired," and if they say no, then do you still want to work there?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Hey,
Exactly.
that's pretty screwed up.
Our core values for real? Or
Yeah. No, you're pro sex slaves. Got it. All right, I'm out.
Yeah.
No, seriously.
You can't be pro woman. You can't be pro equal rights. You can't be pro all these things
No.
and not
Be pro slaves
anti-slave.
or anti-slave. Yeah. All right. Well, very eye opening. Again, thank you guys so much for coming on the show. I'm very inspired to get this out into clips, into the people, and get some money behind it to benefit helping stop this here. And then, as your guys' motto, I've seen on your emails that sign off till all are free, then outside of here, because you guys will put an end to it here, but that's just the beginning.
Yeah, and other people get to be a part of that too.
Yeah.
I view our community as a bunch of people with flashlights. Super lame. Maybe it's just a simple idea, but they're shining the light on the problem. Either seeing victims, seeing, if they see a trafficker, but also asking if they shine the light on this problem here, there's going to be a lot of questions that come up, and it's okay to ask why.
Yeah.
Why aren't our children being taught this in their schools? And it just brings up discussions.
It's a great question.
How many people?
I definitely wasn't.
No, how many people have been arrested as a John or a trafficker in this county? And then how many actually serve time? Why? If the number isn't matching, we need to ask the question why. And it's okay, and I suggest people do this. It's also good to shine a light on nonprofits. Look at us. We hold the highest ratings for all nonprofit. They view and they research and they go after and they grade nonprofits.
Right.
I would highly suggest that if you're giving any money to a nonprofit, that you
I agree. A lot of
shine
them are
a light on
shams.
that.
Yeah.
You do your homework.
Because if you're giving it to one organization and they're not being accountable for that money, and they're misusing it, you're taking it away from the fight.
Yeah, like Goodwill has a jet. You really need that jet?
Yeah.
No, you don't need that jet.
I like Jay's analogy there too, because when we look at this problem, and I want to encourage your listeners too, it's one flashlight at a time, and we're never going to get rid of cockroaches, right? Like there's always going to be cockroaches. There's always going to be traffickers. There's always going to be evil men that are going to want to exploit and manipulate. But right now we have cockroaches just sitting on our couches and sitting in our chairs.
Yeah.
And we want to shine that light and push them in the corners and just clean your room. That's all I'm asking you. Clean your room. Clean your room of cockroaches. If they're in there, They're deep in the recesses that we can't see. And that's what I appreciate that you're doing with Mazama. You guys have taken this. You're taking these simple little steps. You're not trying to solve this problem as a country, but what you can affect right here, you're taking action on, and that is a huge step. And if more people would just do that, we're going to push these cockroaches back into the shadows.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's clean our rooms. Starting with Ben. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it so much. Pleasure.